open here. And just so that you know, we do record these sessions for the purposes of having them, especially the beginning for the panelists. We're torn on plans of sharing them publicly, especially the conversations where we may be talking about personal experiences, field work, and that sort of thing. So for now, we're going to keep the asset and determine later on whether we are going to share them. But we decided to record them otherwise because you lose the opportunity after they are not shared. After you've had the session, then you haven't pushed the record button. So welcome everybody to the November version and meetup of Anthropology in Praxis. Tonight, the topic is applying anthropology in an AI world. And we've got two great speakers, Matt and Brian. We'll talk about who they are in a moment. Next slide. I was thinking, first of all, for those of us that may not know who we are or new members, I just wanted to remind you about who we are. We are a group dedicated to providing a forum to practicing professional and applied anthropologists for the exchange of ideas, information, and experiences related to the practical application of anthropology and ethnography. We've been actively working to expand our network in Canada, and AP is an official network of CASCA, which is Canada's Canadian Anthropology Society, but there is no requirement to join CASCA to meet with us. But for those of you in Canada or not, joining CASCA does come with its own benefits, especially the annual meeting that is very fulfilling for those of us that want to network and get together with our colleagues and talk about anthropology in Canada and the work that we're doing beyond. Like I said, membership, maybe I didn't remember you would know this though, but membership is free. We are a Google group. We committed to doing virtual meetups right now bi-monthly. This is our second official one besides the stuff that we did over the summer, and community-driven engagement to drive some awareness and understanding of anthropology out in the world beyond academia. We will do things in the future like having a member directory, but those things will come in the future. So that is who we are. And we are a bunch of convener volunteers. So this is all brought to you by a volunteer group that brings us together, myself, Kai, Cora, Gemma, and Craig, who are with us this evening. Next slide. I wanted to share a bit of inspiration of how we got here to this session. We were sitting, Cora and I actually were sitting beside each other at the annual general meeting in Montreal just this past year. And the incoming president for CASCA, Liesl Gambold, stated this, and I captured it verbatim. Our anthropology, experiential, and sensory data cannot be created by AI. And she asked, how does AI change the value of anthropology going forward? And that provocation really stuck with me. And because of the personal inquiry and work that I had been doing in AI, I took that to heart and wanted to learn more and have a conversation. And we brought it forward to this group and brought two of our colleagues forward in order to have a conversation about this today. So as anthropologists, of course, we're probably all asking lots of questions about AI because we are so curious about the world. So what should we do? What should we be doing? How is this going to change culture? What should we be prepared for? So next slide. Tonight we have two people. Thank you both again, Matt and Brian, for joining us. Matt Artz is from Philadelphia. That's where he's at right now. He's an anthropologist, designer, and technologist specializing in AI product development. He's also the founder of Azimuth Labs, and he's hosted two podcasts, Anthropology in Business and Anthro to UX. And he's also the co-editor of the book that's new and highly recommended, MTech Anthropology, and another forthcoming book, Anthropology and AI. His work's been featured on TED, UNESCO, South by Southwest, and Apple's Planet of the Apps. Thank you, Matt. And Brian is a professor and chair of the anthropology department at the University of Victoria. Brian's work has long been engaged with supporting Indigenous people's rights, title, and governance. He has a keen interest in technologies and was recognized by Google's Earth Outreach Impact Award. And when we send out these slides, there'll be a few links at the end, both for both Matt and Brian, and including this Earth Outreach Impact Award. Congratulations, Brian, on that. He's been actively experimenting with AI systems, multimodal enabled LLMs, large language models like Gemini, and is working on policy development for the use and governance of AI in academic contexts. So thank you again, both, for being here. If we go to the next slide. What we're going to do tonight is a panel discussion. So I'm just going to share with you the questions that we provided Matt and Brian ahead of time, and then I'll paste them into the chat. So the questions that we provided them, and we'll start with, is what role does AI play in your work as an anthropologist? How does AI change the value of anthropology going forward? What contributions can anthropology and anthropologists make in an AI world? What opportunities or threats should anthropology pay most attention to? And what advice do you have for students and early career anthropologists for working in non-academic settings? Do you have extra training you'd recommend, and why? So we'll paste those to the chat and get started with a conversation. And what we will do after we have the panel discussion is we'll open up for questions. Right now, it looks like we've got 22 people online. We thought we'd do breakout sessions, but we've decided we won't do that until it's a really large, unruly group. But it seems everyone really likes to hear what everyone else is asking. So, and we've got the time to do that. This is about networking and learning from each other. So we'll probably just do a group conversation after that. So from here, you can close the slides down, Gemma, and we will start by getting the questions into the chat. And to get started, I actually have an extra question for the both of you. If you want to, Matt, we'll start with you. If there's anything additional you want us to know about you? And secondly, what got you interested in AI as an anthropologist? And then you can, we'll get Brian to talk, and then we'll start working our way through the questions.
Sure. So I don't think there's too much more to say. I'll maybe just throw out the date. So Anthropology and AI, the book that was mentioned, that comes out about December 9th. It always shifts a little bit, but I think right now they're tracking for the 9th or the 12th. So that would be available on Routledge. Um, and that is a full book, edited volume, full book dedicated, right, to chapters on AI. The previous book, MTech Anthropology, is about emerging tech. More broadly, my chapter is on AI, but not all chapters are on AI. The only other thing I would say is I'm speaking in a personal capacity tonight, but like I did 17-ish years in the private sector, and now I'm in the public sector. And so I sort of, I have experience doing this work in sort of various, organizational different kind of configurations. That said, the I got involved in AI because I always worked in tech. So unlike many people who like, maybe they're an anthropologist and then they go like work in tech, like I was actually working in tech, went back to get an anthropology degree to study research so that I could intentionally bring that into the work I was doing in tech. And so because I was working in tech for a while, it just sort of naturally happened. Around 2016, we were using it to predict energy for a product. Then we were getting into recommender systems for various consumer products. One of those that was featured by Apple that was mentioned, where we were recommending people. Another one that was featured by South by Southwest was again sort of recommending people, but also recommending content. So kind of multi-sided market. And so I did a lot of work in recommender systems. And these days, pretty much the only thing I build is AI products, custom AI products. And so, basically 2016 to now, so almost 10 years sort of, with experience in that space.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for sharing a bit more. How about you, Brian? Anything else you want to share a bit more about yourself, your work, and how did you get into the interest of AI?
Thanks, Natalie, and thanks everyone for coming today. This is a really interesting discussion. Maybe unlike Matt, who is an actual expert in this topic, I am probably like many of you, a tinkerer and somebody who's learning this as he goes. And but I've long been interested in the technology, interested in technology generally. I mean, really, ever since I was a kid, playing with this stuff, making it part of my workflow in my life. As any of you who know me recognizes that these have always been in my interests. And I first really got exposed to these kinds of things when I was doing some work with the team at Google who looks at Google Earth and Google Earth Engine and doing some of the machine learning work around remote sensing and change detection. And I realized that this kind of application had just incredible implications for the kind of questions Indigenous communities were asking about effects in their territories and so on. So that was probably around, I don't know, about the same time, 2016, 2017, 2018, in that range, where getting exposed to some of these early iterations of those tools and getting my hands on them, playing with it a bit. And then I had the opportunity to give a talk at that Anthropology and AI session that the RAI hosted a number of
Mm,
years ago. It was during COVID. We were all supposed to go to
mm,
the UK, but it ended up being, online. And I gave a paper there about thinking about these incredible systems and how they could empower Indigenous governance in their decision making. But worried that the technical capacity to use the skills we're still quite a high threshold. You had to have some competency in programming, Python or JavaScript, and that was a barrier. And shortly after that session, the first kind of public release of ChatGPT came out, and this kind of like technical threshold sort of collapsed in terms of being a barrier,
mm,
being able to use these tools with just like natural language chatbot kind of things. And but just before that had happened, I remember I was doing some work in a school program in a public school in Ladysmith here on Vancouver Island, a small community that had mostly Indigenous students in the program. And they were doing all kinds of work around uh, with their elders on language and weaving and place names and all this kind of stuff. And they said, Brian, come talk to us about AI. So I had this incredible conversation with the youth and the elders in the school as they were just imagining, oh, what would happen if we had that tool and we could use it and we, had it for ourselves. And although there was some small caution, we don't want to be replaced by robots in that conversation. There was just so much hope and optimism, and that thirst for the kind of, I think, uh, power that those tools can unlock to really enable communities to
mm.
see their goals. That it was a very encouraging moment for me to stay engaged and involved in the discussion, even though in the early response in academia, it has been all about AI integrity and cheating, and we should shut these things down. I heard somebody say we should take the AI and launch it on a rocket into a sun so we never see it again, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a tricky space to be in right now. So
Mhm.
that's a little background.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. Well, let's tackle the first question, what you want to share, and turn the attention towards anthropology and AI. So, Matt, your role as an anthropologist, what role does AI play in your work as an anthropologist?
So, the way I would frame it is I study AI, I use AI from a sort of computational methods perspective, and then I build products, AI products, right? And so I believe that there is value for us to contribute across that entire life cycle. And I think we have a lot to contribute at each of those points. And, I tried to embrace that. And so really it's the thrust of pretty much everything I do as an anthropologist at this point in time, including I recently put out some tooling on GitHub, right, that I've been using internally for a while that does everything like generates code books and chunks interviews and then does deductive and inductive coding and and thematic analysis. And it's not a chatbot. It's data science notebooks. But like I have a lot of tools that I haven't released, but across the board, I'm basically engaged, and I think there's a lot of opportunity from the computational methods perspective.
That's great. I think because it's public, we can include a link to the
Okay.
GitHub in the resources? Great. Thanks, Matt. Brian, how about you? What role
Thank you.
is AI playing in your
Sure.
work as an anthropologist?
Yeah, and Matt, I mean, I just want to say, tell me more. Like what you're
Yeah.
doing, I think is really exciting, and I hope we hear more of those details.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I've been using AI. I think like I saw a couple Otter AI logins here at the beginning. Started with those kinds of simple tools, just AI for transcribing, a little bit of translating, some of what we heard about earlier on machine learning in for those Earth observations. But more recently, I've been using the Gen AI tools as a bit of a writing partner, helping me in workflow from notes and early drafts I have of writing. I did a very nice workflow once where I had a YouTube talk of a conference presentation that I made. I brought the transcript from YouTube in. I got the AI to clean it up, to take out all my false starts. I gave it a list of indigenous terms that I had said and got it to replace all the junky iterations of the indigenous terms in the transcript. And then I got it to bring these different drafts of notes and a talk and a draft paper together into an early draft of writing, sort of helping me with that kind of, as a writing partner, kind of workflow, kind of guided assembly of that paper. So iterating out writing really, really quickly. I've used tools like Notebook LM to help with guided retrieval of concepts from documents. So
Mm,
feeding it a big library of PDFs that I want to not just search for, but ask it to kind of logical questions about the kinds of things that are in those documents to help get out some kinds of answers around those ideas. Where did those ideas occur? What do they look like? What are some of the differences? What are some of the examples? And again, with a larger corpus of material, thousands of pages in this case, it made that process quite efficient and quite quick. So I thought that was really useful in that case. I had fed it a bunch of old ethnographies. Um, and lastly, the thing that I hope everybody is using it for is it's just such a capable tool for administrative tasks. So
mm,
filling in forms, just getting through the kind of administrivia that goes with life as an anthropologist, using it to just like accelerate those processes. Even something
mm,
as basic as a field safety plan. Just had it help me write a field safety plan in a very short order. Handed that thing through the system and was actually thanked from our safety office for having such a thoughtful and considerate safety plan. It was
mm.
quite a useful and reasonable piece for that. So I'd say that all in all, it's become useful for me as an anthropologist when I've given it lots of topics, lots of context. So it's not very good to just use it to get information or to ask it questions about things that it thinks it might know. That's where all the hallucination space sort of comes in. But with tons of context and drilling down into that context, it's been really, really useful. And remembering that these systems are they're about logic and reasoning rather than retrieval so much. And so, getting it to be in that kind of reasoning space with you as something to have these conversations about, I found it quite useful.
Thank you. I have some follow-up questions, but I think specifically about research, but I think we're going to just continue on. Kat's put a comment in the chat as well, and I'm hoping she can speak to when we get to the conversation, or at least we can read it and respond to it. Because I know that there is some opinions out there and around the use of these tools to replace anthropologists' ability to synthesize data and to see the patterns in data and the accuracy of those. And I would just recently sitting in on an EPIC, some debriefs from the recent EPIC conference about that, and there were some concerns raised there. But anyhow, let's park that. Second question. How does AI change the value of anthropology? So kind of on the heels of what I just said. So, and if you might want to take a little glance at Kat's question. She says, on one hand, I always make the argument that anthros and qualitative researchers are irreplaceable by AI due to our embodied skills, contextual understanding, etc. But on the other hand, we are being defunded and devalued in the industry, jobs being cut, disciplines losing funding. Can you speak to the need for us to constantly articulate our value to higher powers, what we can do in the meantime until the shit hits the fan, and people hopefully realize they shouldn't have defunded our scholarly streams? And do you also encounter this polarity in your discussions with your peers? So a good complement to the question about, how does AI change the value of anthropology going forward? Matt?
So I may be a bit contrarian there in that, well, first I will say that organizations, in my experience, for a long time at this point, have been moving, right? First, there's basically sort of big data and data science, and now it's AI. And we've been on like, a 10, maybe even 15-year uptick of insights being driven by computation. And that's only accelerating recently. And I have many colleagues who, there are some who have been let go from, insights roles within organizations at all levels, very senior to junior. There are colleagues who, are consultants that have lost business recently or business has slowed down because the companies are using AI. And so I think this is not a question of will it happen? I think it's already happened. And it has been happening, right, with like the rise of data science and big data. And whether or not, I make the argument that whether or not it's as good, to me, is sort of an irrelevant argument because generally speaking, most businesses are going to probably go for what's quicker and cheaper in like probably most of the times. And frankly, like in product development, it's kind of fine because you're going to release an update in a few weeks from now, right? So, I mean, it's a different thing if you're like, it's exploratory research and you're thinking about a completely new product. But from like on a tactical kind of UX perspective, where like, you're doing kind of evaluative work and you're going to push out some changes, right? We're going to iterate on that anyway. So even if you get it slightly wrong, I would make the argument it's actually not that consequential in many ways. I'm not saying that terrible things can't happen. Of course they can, right? But so I would make the argument that one, it's this displacement has already happened. Two, it's sort of accelerating. Three, I don't actually think saying that like we're better or even that, our embodied nature makes it better. Um, because a lot of people in decision-making positions in my experience, like aren't super mindful of that, or like it's not the major driver. There are, of course, exceptions everywhere, even within, companies, right? There are maybe teams that operate differently. There are product lines that are more important than others in some sense that, get extra care. But as a whole, I think what we see is a displacement happening. And, as far as the embodiment, I think that's true today. I don't know though, like, I don't know that we hold on to that forever as like, if that's like the last little bit of land we stand on, my hunch is there are things that encroach on that, right? Um, you could see a distant future with world models and robotics where they still won't be equivalent to humans, but they may still do a fairly good job of collecting sort of data in a very, sensory way, not all that different than a human, possibly. And so I wouldn't, I would guard against that. And so for me, then what I think the response needs to be is we need to figure out potentially how can we sort of take control and shape these tools so that maybe they are more anthropological, maybe that we have more control over them. And importantly, I have a body of work kind of coming out over the next maybe 6, 8 months, depending on academic publishing timelines, that really tries to make the case that, by thinking about human-centered AI and kind of human in the loop sort of design paradigms, we can actually build this tech to support us and to support multiple viewpoints and sort of epistemic pluralism and to create friction that challenges us to think harder and not so that it's full automation, but it's augmentation that actually gets the best of both worlds. And I'm hopeful that if we do that well, we have the ability to sort of sell that to our peers so that they see that a hybrid approach can have value because, again, in a lot of cases, the machine is going to do pretty well.
Mhm. Matt, thank you for that.
Thank you
You're
for
on the
that.
heels of our next question, which will talk about what can we do, and to your point about how can we contribute to this AI world. So, looking forward to hearing more details about what we all think about that. But Brian, to go back to the question of, in your opinion, how does AI change the value of anthropology going forward?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, in some ways, that's the same sort of question that that's happening in the academic circles about, the crisis of post-secondary education and, why should we even go to universities when we can just get the AIs to do it? Can't we just Google it? Um, or what's the value of writing the paper anymore? Is the paper dead as a
Mm,
form of sharing assessments and so on? And I think something that Matt said, like the humans need to be in charge and in the room
mhm,
and with their hand at that wheel in a way. Like we need people with really good, thoughtful skills and knowledge and experience and sense of nuance and so on to be handling these systems. And so I think the value of anthropology um, in some ways doesn't change at all. It's the same reason why
mm,
we need anthropologists in the first place. We need people who have this kind of nuanced understanding of how the world really works.
mm,
And as we're doing our prompting or having our conversations or asking our questions, and we're having our AI helpers in that task, we'll be the ones who can see if the answers are useful, if the context that have been provided in order for those answers to come out, have had biases or have had problems in that, or are good, or just well selected context and so on. So I think. Really that all of this has nothing to do with the changing the value of anthropologists. In fact, I think maybe because anthropologists are so good at knowing how the world works, that they may in fact be more valuable in the future
mm,
in a world
mm,
that is needing people with that sense of nuance and subtlety and the ability to assess something in a situation where there's ambiguity and so on.
mm,
Anthropologist is a great person for those kinds of tasks. But
mm,
I also think the other, great space for anthropology, and we can see this happening in the chat here, is that anthropologists have their finger on the ethical space as well, right?
mm,
And so there's a sense that the value of anthropology is that we've been wrestling with the demons of our past. Anybody who have gone through kind of an undergraduate or graduate program has had to exercise the demons of the discipline in some way, and
mhm,
that sets us up really well for understanding the demons in our present, right? And
mm,
to think through the kinds of ethical issues that are involved in these kinds of AI assisted, AI driven frameworks or decision-making frameworks that rely on AI data and so on, or the risks, the governance risks, the things that Toa is talking about, the confidentiality risks and so on.
mm,
Anthropologists are in a beautiful position to be asking the right questions, right? It's the old
mhm,
Margaret Mead quote about, the answers are easy. It's asking the right questions that's the hard thing. So I think there's much to offer there in terms of our value as ethical practitioners.
mm,
Um, and I think, yeah, I mean, even, um, yeah, just thinking about the sort of, I haven't fully thought through this idea that I was having about it, but it was about AI guardrails,
mm,
and we know that some AIs have more guardrails, and others, who's using Grok these days? It's the people who want to, there's that funny comedian who was talking about people who want to know about the final solution and like terrible things like that, right? And where is the anthropologist in that room to help uh, be the guardrails on these kinds of cultural dimensions of AI that because of the training biases and so on, that the people receiving that might not have, but the anthropologist can see it immediately when it's out there. So again, I think that those sort of nuances are the sort of, yeah, human in the room when that we need to be the intermediary between the thing that the machine is spitting out and the machine and the world that those uh, that machine aided um, information or expressions are being mobilized in. And I just say, like, in terms of how does AI change the value of anthropology going forward? Maybe the other thing I can say is that AI, people on both sides of the spectrum, the sort of purist anthropologists who may not want to have the robot in the room at all, there may be a great value for those people, right? We really are going to need people who are rooted in the old cultural ways, who understand the values of those things, who can facilitate those kinds of conversations with safety and honor and respect and dignity and so on. And also, the anthropologist who has embraced that AI may really just be like a more valuable person because they have the kind of power
Mm,
that those youths were talking about at their
mhm,
fingertips, whether it's,
mm,
navigating the administrivia or speaking in a language that can mobilize large content contexts into answers that have power. So I'm
mm,
hoping that AI can help enhance the value of anthropologists as well.
mhm. Thank you both. I think it's a great reminder that we are adapting along as our culture changes as anthropologists and adapting our thinking, adapting to the changes over the course of time. And this is another, transition in time that anthropologists can step into. So I appreciate that. And talking about stepping into, specifically, do you have any thoughts about how we can contribute as anthropologists in an AI world? You both started to touch on that. So maybe just revisit those ideas about how we can actually contribute some practical ideas and tips. And if you have any thoughts about what the greatest opportunities are, again, you've both touched on this as well, or maybe threats that we need to be paying attention to, because there is quite a between the doomers and the boomers, there is quite a spectrum of thought out there around the progression of AI. So I'd be interested to hear anything that you want to share, repeat around what can we be doing as anthropologists, and if there's any big opportunities or threats we specifically should pay attention to. Matt?
Thanks. So, the thing I would like to encourage everybody to do is to get involved, roll up the sleeves and get involved, contributing to the development of products at the earliest stage possible. Brian used the wording, if we were in the room, and we actually started our MTech book with like a little sort of hypothetical vignette making the case of what if anthropologists were in the room when Google was getting started. And the rationale for using that example was that, if you think of what Google was trying to do, which was organize the world's knowledge, and they were trying to, as years went by, try to build that into a knowledge graph, which is essentially symbolic AI, but is very much about sort of ontologies and things we're comfortable with. Um, you kind of wonder like why weren't we involved in a project like that? And if we were, what could we have potentially done to guide that in a way that might even be more beneficial? Right. And so the reason I bring that up is because I agree that we need to be in the room. And importantly,
Mm,
I would make the argument, again, potentially contrarian, but a lot of social scientists, well beyond anthropology, have written about social media since the beginning and the harms that were going to come from it. And I would make the argument that very little came out of the critique of that.
mm,
Um, in many ways, you could argue they've only become emboldened, which is probably like a broader conversation, and there's a number of reasons there. But the point here is like, the problems have only escalated over the years. And Um, it is true that anthropologists have been working in UX roles like, over the past, period of time in some of these companies. But sometimes when the tech is formed and it's already out, it's kind of can be a little hard to change it, right? So I'm trying to get everybody to get involved as early in each sort of major wave. And we're in a new major wave, which is like sort of transformer architecture, right? Large language models, generative AI, obviously all those are related. Um, and we have a precedent there. So anthropologists were involved in the cybernetics movement from the beginning.
Mm.
Cybernetics sort of rolls into becoming AI in many ways. Many of the same people who were at the original cybernetic conferences show up at the Dartmouth conference of where AI is coined in
Mm.
1956. We were in the 60s and 70s experimenting with symbolic AI in a very early digital methods capacity. Um, Doing interesting things like the bowl processor for trying to make sense of Indian tabla drumming, right? Like really cool work. And then Lucy Suchman, Diana Forsyth, right? And like, really great work at like fairly, early in different waves. And we then just sort of gave that up. In my opinion, my read of the lit, we sort of, at least in the published lit, we kind of gave that up, receded to sort of critical distance, like critiquing from
Mm.
afar. And yes, there were still people working in tech, but at least they were not publishing. And I would make the argument that we probably weren't there in enough, sort of quantity and early enough to really shape many things. And
Mm.
so what I really want to see everybody do is get involved as soon as possible because if we don't, and not just anthropology, because I actually don't think anthropology is like magical compared to some other disciplines. I think all disciplines have something incredible to contribute.
Mhm.
And we have our own unique worldview to contribute, but I want all of us there, not just sort of engineering and business, but all the sort of social sciences, the humanities in the room, building this together, because I'm of the opinion that if we are not there, we are going to have another social media moment, and it's likely going to be even more dire.
Mhm. Thank you, Matt. Any ideas about how we get in the room?
That is definitely a harder thing, but it is what I think one of the things I think why, well, let me say this, why I think that is harder is because if you look around, not many anthropologists, at least that we know of, have really made it to like C-suite levels. Um, there was somebody like I'm drawing a blank, maybe I'm drawing a blank on the name, but in a dating organization that was fairly senior. Um,
Mm.
there's a handful. Right, but like the call for the chief culture officer from Grant McCracken,
Mhm.
right? Like we've really never
Mhm.
seen that, right? And I would argue
Mhm.
we still need to push for that because if we don't have like
Mhm.
that kind of power, right, we're significantly limited.
Mhm.
Um, but in absence of that, I would encourage folks to not only think of roles like UX in tech, but to
Mhm.
think of product management. So I'm a product manager, and one of the
Mhm.
reasons I switched about 10 years ago 8 years ago, somewhere in that range, is because research often gets sort of done, the findings get thrown, the insights get thrown over the wall, and then the product manager chooses to do what they will with them.
Mm.
And sometimes they take some of them on, sometimes they don't. The product manager ultimately decides what ships or not in a product.
Mm.
Mm.
And that is the role that I think we
Mm.
should be in because not only do we then lead and direct the research, right, but we basically make sure that it gets implemented as we see fit. And I will also say there are times where I don't even take all the research myself because like, in product you're balancing business, tech, and research and design. And like there has to be trade-offs, right? It's not
Mm.
like you can just embody every aspect of the research all of the time. Nevertheless, that role provides us much more agency than being in roles like UX research roles. And so I
Mm.
would encourage others, especially those who are technically minded, to think about roles like that.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. How about you, Brian? What do you think
Just
contribute what contributions we can make, and if there's any
for
big
sure.
opportunities or threats you want us to be aware of?
I just yeah, just thank you, Matt. Also, that's just so I'm really inspired to
Mhm.
hear your perspectives there, and it was making me think about actually one of my favorite anthropologists who's in a product management role at Google, quite a senior one, has enormous influence there. The kind of things that we've seen coming out of Google Earth and Google Maps has have been inspired and vetted and pushed and prodded by her. And she's definitely a trained anthropologist and is doing all the things that you're saying. So I just want to echo what you said. People should be thinking about those kinds of trajectories. And really look forward to picking up your books, Matt. I hope you do some shameless plugs for them at the end there. Give us some links to the website in the
Mhm,
chat, because I think there's lots for us to read
mhm,
about this history
mhm,
of our discipline's involvement, and how we can think about ourselves as part of these conversations to be re-engaging them. Um, I was thinking when you asked this question, Natalie, really about kind of next steps, things that are on my mind right now. Like I think we should continue to tinker. I mean, not all of us are going to be able to become a product manager at a major AI firm, but all of
mhm,
us can spin up a Docker container on a Linux box at home, and like download a model and start to tinker with it, right? And so um, I think that we should be doing that, thinking about our own local agents. I mean, basically, we should be trying to do the things that Matt's doing and hopefully monetizing and bringing out in the world. We should be trying to do those kinds of things. Like, and people like Toa Bear on this call has you made really important. I think contributions by bringing out software, and workflow platforms that started with really practical problems that communities that we work with are facing. And I think this AI, business is a whole new tool set that we can bring into those conversations, and we shouldn't be shy to either tinker ourselves or partner with people who can do that tinkering, that can be guided by the kinds of approaches and anthropological questions and sensibilities and responsibilities and relationships, all the things that we're coming to it with, to come out with the kind of like excellence that somebody like Toa has come out with in the product that he's done. Not an AI product, but a digital product. Like I think that work comes out of these conversations. So I do hope that we can make those contributions locally, like working at that local level, playing with these tools ourselves, spinning them up in safe and guided environments. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, that I really think that we can contribute to, are the issues around transparency,
mhm,
right? And transparency in our AI practice. Um, this is sort of the academic problem of like, how do we cite the AI? Where does he go in the bibliography or whatever, that sort of thing? But I think that the quality of the work that we're doing demands a sort of a different kind of solution in terms of that transparency. And I hope that as anthropologists, we can think about what are appropriate and reasonable ways to be sure that our practices are transparent, both on the kinds of work that we're doing to build context or training and that sort of thing, so that there is
mhm,
transparency in the work that's coming out on the other side, that people are relying on to make decisions in the world, or to inform themselves, or to educate people, or whatever, however our knowledge is being mobilized. Uh, that we've done a good job there of not just having a black box, or worse, having this AI box that we're shrouding in shame and stigma, that we don't really want
mhm,
to talk about, that maybe I'll just use on the side and not tell anybody, because I think that's not going to be helpful for us. So I think
mhm.
as we're open and transparent about that we can have some good best practices in that, and anthropologists can be leaders in that space.
Thank you. It sounds like Brian. I like the stigma and shame. I think we do need to address that. You coming from an academic perspective, I know that there's, a heated debate about what's right and what's wrong, what's ethical, what's not ethical, and the reality is people are using it. And thank you for sharing, even upfront, yourself using it as a writing partner and the ways that you're using it. Um, continuing on that vein from you, Brian, specifically, any quick thoughts about? We like asking this question because it's for our students. What advice does anyone have, and specifically, even to AI? I mean, if there's something, some sort of course that you've taken, but as working in non-academic settings, is there any additional training that you would recommend, and why? So either in the topic of AI or not in the topic of AI, to support anthropologists working in non-academic settings.
I mean, just off the top, I would just say, and it's been kind of the theme that I've been sharing here for the students. Please don't get left behind, right?
Mm,
Tinker, experiment, get informed, use different tools. Don't just go down the one tool that you got for free, right? Like try a few different things out and understand the difference between them and so on. So I think mostly for the students, like you should feel that there is some safety for you to do that right now and learn it and practice it and make mistakes in a world where, it's just your paper at the end of the day. Because when you come out of this and you're working for Craig Candler at Reciprocity or something like that, I really hope that you're not in that, oh, I'm just faking it here. I don't know what I'm doing. Like that you've had that chance at university and now you've built some
mhm,
skills and some talent and some critical edge and some ways to deploy yourself in a really responsible and effective way. So yeah, just like don't get left behind
mm,
and keep it broad, like try a bunch of different things.
Thank you, Brian. It's a great piece of advice. Matt, how about you? Any recommendations from you for students or even us, in careers looking to sharpen our skills?
Well, I certainly agree with Brian. Like, the spirit of tinkering will treat you well in life, right? Like, most of what I know about computing is from that. Uh, and um, I would definitely encourage everybody to just play around. Most things you can't break, right? You can always undo in some way. Um, so I wholeheartedly back that statement up. I would also say, though, more broadly, we're in a business context, the things that I see, like it's almost easier for me right now to hire a business person and treat and teach them to think anthropologically than like vice versa, because sometimes like learning the technical skills can be a high bar, right? And so the
Mhm,
sooner you can start, the easier it is because like, you know, what I'm really looking like my ideal candidate is is really a computational social scientist, right? That's
mhm,
kind of ideally what I want. I want somebody who can do both at this point in time. That is I can basically, we're often working under tighter deadlines, smaller budgets, and, to be able to do a little bit of traditional qual to kind of really truly understand the context, to kind of get some, thick data in that sense, and then to sort of back that up with something that, you scrape or you mine, whatever it is, right? Like in a big kind of data sense, and bring those two together in conversation is to me more valuable than one or the other. And so, that's very much on sort of this sort of AI slash even you could say data science front. But beyond that, communication, storytelling, design skills, right? Those are also just super helpful in this environment because so much of what we're doing is trying to tell stories with this data, right? And so like being able to present it in a concise, neat package that isn't even always meant to convince people, right? It's maybe sometimes meant to more start a conversation, right? As like sort of an iterative kind of engagement, right? Where we're exploring together. But like that's kind of the stuff, broadly speaking, that, I'm looking for in folks these days. Beyond that, what I would say is even though we've talked in a lot of ways kind of about some of the technical aspects tonight, at least that's kind of mostly what I was in a lot of my responses. I was speaking in a very technical
mhm,
way, but like the class I teach at Penn is AI in organizations, and the way I teach
mhm,
that course is we almost barely touch any of the tech of AI at all, and it's all framed through the lens of AI maturity. So we're looking at things like leadership and strategy and governance and risk and like, a whole host of dimensions. And the reason I teach it that way is because what you're seeing right now in organizations is most organizations are struggling to get past the pilot stage
Hmm.
and get to sort of scale in some way. And I don't mean a Google, I don't necessarily mean an OpenAI, right? But like, aside from the big labs, most of your sort of your more, your everyday business, it doesn't matter where it is, healthcare, your mom and pop, right? It doesn't really matter. So many of them are struggling to get one past chatbots and two to scale anything custom.
Hmm.
And so you need to sort of, if you want to do work in that space, understanding kind of what goes into maturity more broadly and how you can help an organization succeed is incredibly useful. And of course, I would make the argument we have tools to contribute to that, tools and
Hmm.
knowledge, right?
Hmm. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Can I just
Ryan,
add
yeah.
a small thing that came to mind in
Hmm.
Matt's first part of what he said there around the computational skills? And again, this is really for the students. It's just something that I've thought of a number of times, just with our own students. Those students who love the archaeology and the biological anthropology just as much as the sociocultural tend to be the ones that are more resilient and useful in these kinds of contexts where you need to have both that sort of qualitative nuance but being able to handle a data set and manage
Mm-hmm.
the implications of that than ones that are just focused solely in a specific area like a critical theory anthropology, something like that, right? So give some love to your
Hmm.
archaeology courses as just as much as your sociocultural courses
Hmm. And
because
take
those
some
skills
date.
translate when
Yeah.
you're learning data management and some zoo archaeology table and all that kind of stuff, that translates so nice into the kinds of thinking that you might have to do in another computational science kind of element.
Yeah, it's very true. And if you have the opportunity, I would say take some um, uh, data analytics courses in some capacity on how to present and work with data sets. This has been incredibly enlightening and helpful. As a facilitator, I got to say, like, I'm a learner in this. So, facilitating and being on my toes about what I want to ask next is actually a real tough, a real tough place to be because I'm thinking about what's happening in my own career and the questions that I want to ask. So, thank you both very much. We are going to open it up for questions now, so we can take questions by raising